Hello, this is Danny from CG Dreams, and today this is an update that I'm going to be showing you to a workflow that I'm using for the hair system within Cinema 4D. In particular, this is a workflow in which incorporates use of splines converted to hair guides and then rerouting them back to the scalp. So this is what I'm going to be covering, and a few little problems that occur that I've now got around, which I'm going to be showing you today. So I'm going to keep things quite simple to bring the point across to you so that I can make this video as short as possible, which is always a good thing in my opinion when it comes to video tutorials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start off with a good old sphere, and then we just look at the display, and for our purposes that should be absolutely fine. But do you know what, I'm just going to go and select a different type of sphere. Something like that would be quite fine for us, and then I'm going to just make that editable. The next thing is I'm going to go to one of my custom layouts. I'm just going to bring this up, and this custom layout was something that I made up so that I can gain access to all the hair tools. So all the hair tools that you're going to be seeing in a minute is always coming from our simulate tab, and they're all here. These here, I've just docked them in different places, so if you're not sure where they are, then just look for the equivalent tools that I'm going to be using. So to add hair, I always use this one here. The mode is where I want to do the sculpting, different types of modes. This will be the tips down to the guides themselves. That's what I normally use. The tips to the guides, tips for the fine stuff, the guides for the big movements. In the hair edit, there's a couple of things that I may want to be using in here, and this is where you'll find them in here. In this particular video, I don't think I'm going to be doing any of that. Again, in here, probably nothing in there. Hair tools I will definitely be using. Nothing in there. So that's where you'll find all the hair tools in what I'm going to show you next. So here they are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first work on the basis of making a selection set. So I'm going to go to my live selection tool, and I'm just going to select a bunch of polygons here, which is going to be my selection set. I'm going to keep it relatively even both sides. Now I'll add a few tips upon selection sets in a minute, but first of all let's get through this process. So I'm going to make a selection set, go to select and set selection. Normally when I want to grow hair specifically from this selection set, I would just select it, go to the simulate tab and then click on add hair, but that's not the way that I want to work with this. What I like to do also is I like to just add a material just so it gives me an idea where my selection set is when I haven't got the ability to see it. So in this particular case, I'll go to the materials and I'll just drag and drop a material on this selection set so it just becomes visible when I haven't got those selection sets selected. It will become all clear to you in a minute why. So what I want to do is I want to work on the basis of making some custom hair guides based upon splines rather than just grow the hair and then style it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the good old pen tool, and the type of spline I'm going to go for is the B spline in this particular case. It's a good idea to have the snapping turned on, and let's just undock this for the minute. So we want enable snapping. I don't want vertex snapping, but I do want polygon snapping. We don't want the object selected. It should allow us to snap anywhere from the object. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and then just draw some guides out there. I'm not going to go too crazy, but I'm going to do something that kind of looks as though I've actually intentionally made this shape. Okay, so I've got this shape going on here, and what I want to do with this is I want to use a clone. So I'm going to put this into a clone. You notice how it's snapped to the surface of the cap, which is exactly what I want in this particular case. Now this particular hairstyle is not something I would normally make, but I'm just doing this to demonstrate something for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the mode graph, go to the cloner, and then drag the spline into the cloner. The type of spline that I want is going to be, also the top of cloner I want is going to be radial. So it's going to go around The axis is wrong at the moment, so I'm going to change the axis to the one that kind of suits it better. In this particular case, it's the XZ. And you notice here that it's given me some nice hair there, or shall I say potential hair there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the guide, the original guide spline. Just going to take it out of the clone for a second, and I just want to move this. I should have really created it a bit more further out for this demonstration. There. I tell you what, I'm not going to bother moving it because it's already locked quite nicely to the surface there. It helps what I'm going to be demonstrating. So it's just pulled it out of place now, unfortunately. That's okay. So we've got the radius, and I'm going to set it like that. That would be absolutely fine. What about the offset? Let's go for that, I think. That's all I'm going to do for this. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. And then what I'm going to do for this is I just want to make it editable by clicking on that top left button, as you can see there, the C key. I'm going to select all of these, and at the moment it's select to adaptive. I want it to be a little bit more uniform. I'm going to take this number down, right click, and then go to connect objects and delete. So what we've got then is we've got one single spline, and that's exactly what I want. Perfect. What I didn't really want is I didn't really want the B spline. I wanted to change it up a little bit, really. But you know what, that's absolutely fine for our purposes for the minute. What I want to do is I just want to pull this out, that colonna null there, and I just want to pull this down to the surface so it's touching the surface of the scalp. You know, to see it start to disappear. Okay, that's good for me. Make sure that it's all there. Okay, so that's assuming that this is going to be our guides. There's not a lot there, I have to admit, but you can obviously increase the clone amount if you want to. What you do from this point is you, with the spline selected, you'll go to your simulate tab. I could go to the other tools I've got docked on the bottom, but I'm going to do it from here for you. And then we go to the hair edit and we click on convert from spline. Brilliant. Now all we do now is we just delete the spline. We no longer need it. We've got our hair guides, exactly what we want. Next thing to do is, you can see here in the hair guides, is that at the moment there's no link there at all. Now right at this stage, if I was to drag my selection set and drop it in there, you'll notice that the hair shifts, the guides shift. So what we need to do is need to make sure that we lock these guides where they are, or at least keep them from moving by storing their position. So what we do is we open up the edit tab found in the guides area for the hair tag, and we click on store, and that's great. And then what we do is we drag and drop our selection set into the link for the guides. It will move, and then we click on restore, and it brings it back to us again. The next step is we need to make sure that the hair is rooted, and you can tell it's not rooted because we've got this little tiny green light bulb shape at the end of the guide, which tells us that it's not rooted. What we need to do now is we need to root it. So I'm going to go to my hair tools, and then in the hair tools you've got this set root, and if you click apply, notice that it shifts, and you think, oh no, this is what I thought when the first time this happened. I thought, no, there's no way of doing this. All you have to do is you just simply have to make sure that you just move your object. Now if you're going to be needing the object to be exactly the way it is, which is more likely the case, then make sure you just store a keyframe before you move it, and move on a couple of frames. But you'll notice when you move the object that the hair springs back into place. So it wasn't really the case that it moved, it needed to be updated. That's all it was. And I'll just press the Control and Z key, and it just brought back the sphere back to the original location anyway. But I like to always use the keyframes to make sure. So now what we have is we have proper hair guides that are generated originally from a spline that was made through a clone, and now we've got it to the point where it's actually part of the scalp. This is really brilliant because it now means that we can use our normal hair grooming tools and then start to style our hair. In this particular case, I want to make sure that the hair mode is set to guides. For bigger changes, I like to sort of change it like that, and there you go. That's really it. The other thing to mention is that in your guides you'll most likely have the root set to either custom or to spline as it was before. We're going to make sure that you want to grow from polygon area. The amount you can increase if you want. I'm going to leave it as what I left it as. The segments, you definitely may want to increase this, but I recommend that you kind of increase this as and when you need to, because you can make really big, nice volume changes very, very quickly and smoothly. And if your computer's lagging a bit, then you may want to have these segments down and then just bring them up a little bit higher if you need them. Another thing as well is there's in the settings there's an ability to even out the distribution of the guides, and this may be the case sometimes, and let's just see if I can find it here. I'm normally used to going to the menu for this particular thing. Yeah, even segments. When you click on even segments, what it should do is it should basically even out the space between them. Sometimes when you're doing big changes, one particular area, it will stretch out the distance between one guide point to the other. The next thing is you need to go to the hair area, and you'll notice that the count for the count of the hairs and segments are void. They're completely grayed out. This is because in the roots it's set to as guides. You just need to go to select polygon area, and then boom, it's all back. When you're going to go for your render, you want to make sure if you've got quite long hair to have these segments quite high, otherwise it's going to look pretty rubbish. Now when you're going to the editor and you want to see some kind of representation of what the hair is going to look like, make sure that when you go to your hairlines that you keep it pretty low so that your system performance can handle it. In my particular case, I'm pretty happy with that. If I just go for just a quick render, you'll notice that you'll get absolutely nothing, and this is because of the way in which we actually made our hair. So what we do is we go to our materials and we go create, we go to our shader, and here you'll find our hair material. We drag and drop that on a hair tag, and now our hair will render. I'm not going to go through styling things in this particular video, but needless to say, you can see here that the power is there for us to really manipulate the hair and get something going pretty quickly based upon guides. You can imagine what you're going to be able to do when you really do work at something and get those initial splines the really perfect shape that you want, a nice flow, maybe over the fringe you want a nice flow. And that's really it for this video. You can see here how we managed to start from splines and work our way to getting proper hair guides on your geometry. So I'm going to leave it right at this particular point and just say thanks for watching, and hopefully the next time that you see another video like this, it's going to be very similar, but it's going to be more refined. We're actually going to go for a proper, realistic, good quality hairstyle. Just one tip before I go. If you are creating draped hair, which is kind of similar to this, you don't need to necessarily go to the point of adding hair guides all over the selection set area like this. You only need to really have hair guides really coming from, let's just say for instance here. So we just get it to come round, okay? This is going to cover the whole of this area here. There's no need to keep on creating layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. Another little tip to mention is that when you do have really silky kind of smooth hair, in the hair geometry what you want to do is you want to make sure that for the hairs in the cloning, have at least some clones in there. The reason why you would want to have some clones in there with the roots set to 0 and your tip set to 0 is because this helps merge in the intersections of hairs that you may be getting in rendering problems. You may get some hair intersecting and it will cause some problems visually. By doing this and setting a little tiny bit of frizz, just a little bit, even though on a really smooth hairstyle you can still have a little bit of frizz, you'll find that you get much more realistic looking hair. And the same for the thickness. You know, you want to start off, I like to start off with say a 0.5 for the thickness. I have a nice ramp going down, but what I do is I will hold in the control key, click once, and then I'll have it just a little bit thinner at the roots. And then what this does is it will give you a much more better look at the roots as it kind of renders out. Let's see if I can just show you this. Just those couple of settings there. Your hair will look much more realistic, although I haven't even styled this hair. So yeah, there's a couple of tips anyway for you to get going. And of course you can watch my other videos on the hair system in general. So I will stop the video now and say goodbye.